On a cold January night in 1937, Count Basie gathered his orchestra members before taking the stage and delivered shocking news. We now have a vocalist, Billie Holiday. At that moment, no one knew that the meeting between one of jazz history's most talented voices and one of its most prestigious orchestras would mark the beginning of the most ruthless internal war the music world had ever witnessed. Because the young woman sitting in the back of the room that night hadn't just come to sing, she was determined to claim her place in a man's world. And the men weren't going to like that one bit. If you're curious about the rest of this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because this is just the beginning. Billie Holiday's joining the Count Basie Orchestra wasn't a coincidence. In 1935 and 1936, the young woman was performing at small clubs throughout Harlem. Musicians who heard Billie's voice at Pod's and Jerry's, Yeah Man, and Dickie Wells were stunned, because this 20-year-old woman's voice carried a depth and maturity far beyond her years. Every song contained pieces of her own story: poverty, loneliness, struggle. These stories touched listeners' hearts. Those were Harlem's golden years. While jazz music filled the streets and talented musicians took the stage at different clubs every night, Billie Holiday's voice held a special place even among this crowd. When audiences watched her performances, they felt as if they were witnessing someone's most intimate memories. Because Billie wasn't just singing, she was sharing her own pain and hopes. Music producer John Hammond experienced the shock of his life the first night he heard Billie. "This woman is going to change music history," he told his friends. Hammond's discovery, for Columbia Records, would create seismic waves in the music industry, because Billie Holiday's voice possessed a power far beyond anything heard before. Her vocals contained not just technical perfection, but spiritual depth. When her first recordings, Your Mother's Son-in-Law and Riffin' the Scotch, began playing on radio in the fall of 1936, music critics were amazed. This young woman's voice contained the maturity of decades of experience. Downbeat magazine welcomed Billie with praise in an article titled, "A New Star is Born." But the real big opportunity would come with her encounter with Count Basie. Count Basie went to the Onyx Club to hear Billie at John Hammond's insistence in the winter. That night, Billie Holiday was performing What a Little Moonlight Can Do on stage. Basie would describe that moment years later. "That voice enchanted me. She wasn't just singing, she was sharing her soul. I offered her a spot in my orchestra that very night." But Basie didn't know at the time that this decision would tear his orchestra apart. The Count Basie Orchestra in 1937 wasn't just a musical group, it was a brotherhood of men who had worked together for over a decade. While Basie sat at the piano as leader, the orchestra's true soul was Lester Young. The saxophonist, nicknamed Prez, effectively managed the orchestra whenever Basie wasn't around. Alongside him, trumpeter Harry Sweets, Edison, drummer Joe Jones, and guitarist Freddie Green were important parts of this hierarchy. Each had their place, position, and ego within the orchestra. An invisible but powerful hierarchy existed among these men. Lester Young was seen as the orchestra's creative leader. His saxophone sound was the most recognizable musical identity of that era. Audiences came to concerts mainly to hear his solo performances. Prez's every appearance drew huge applause, and the music press wrote glowing articles about him. This fed Lester Young's ego and made him feel indispensable to the orchestra. Harry Edison was in a similar position. Edison, who mesmerized audiences with his trumpet solos, was particularly successful in ballad work. The melodies flowing from his instrument touched listeners' hearts. Edison saw himself as the orchestra's emotional manager. Joe Jones was the king of rhythm behind his drums. The tempo he set determined the orchestra's pulse, with all musicians moving according to his lead. Billie Holiday's arrival upset this balance. The young woman wasn't just a vocalist, She was a complete performer and charismatic stage artist. When she took the stage, all attention focused on her. Audiences watched her every move, every change in expression. This wounded the egos of orchestra members who had been at the center of the stage for years. The initial problems seemed minor, but they were actually harbingers of bigger issues. Lester Young was no longer getting the same applause as before. Harry Edison's trumpet solos were overshadowed by Billie's songs. The days when Joe Jones mesmerized everyone with his drum rhythms were behind him. Worst of all, the press began writing Billie Holiday and the Count Basie Orchestra instead of Count Basie and his orchestra. This was a blow too big for male egos to bear. In mid-February, the orchestra members held a secret meeting led by Lester Young. The decision made at this meeting was to systematically sabotage Billie Holiday. "This girl has to go," Young had said. "Either she leaves, or the orchestra falls apart." The others agreed. Their plan was simple. They would make Billie so uncomfortable that she would resign herself. The sabotage started small but effectively. The first week, Billie's sheet music mysteriously disappeared. When she couldn't find the music during rehearsal, she was forced to sing from memory. The orchestra members were pleased with this situation. Catching Billie unprepared gave them the upper hand. But Billie Holiday wasn't someone who would give up easily. That night she went home and memorized all the songs. The second week, costume sabotage began. Billie's stage outfits were deliberately soiled, torn, or disappeared. The young woman had to find solutions at the last minute every time. Sometimes she took the stage in her own everyday clothes, sometimes in dresses borrowed from other female staff. But even this couldn't stop her. In fact, audiences began to appreciate Billie's different styles. The third week, games were played with rehearsal times. Billie was given wrong time. When rehearsal was to start at 2:00 p.m., she was told 3:00 p.m. When she arrived, the orchestra had already started playing. This situation both embarrassed and greatly annoyed Billie. But worse was when whispers began backstage. "This girl isn't disciplined at all. She doesn't keep to her schedule. She's not professional." These rumors spread by word of mouth, damaging Billie's reputation. In the fourth week, the sabotage moved to the stage. For the first time during a concert, the microphone was cut off. When Billie Holiday realized her voice was gone halfway through a song, she was surprised but didn't panic. She turned to the audience in front of the stage and continued singing without the sound system. Audiences greeted this spontaneous move with huge applause, but backstage, the orchestra members were angry. Their plan hadn't worked. The most effective sabotage was social isolation. Orchestra members stopped talking to Billie. She sat alone in the dressing room, with no one chatting with her. She was excluded from lunch breaks and not invited to meetings. The effect of this situation on Billie became apparent very quickly. The young woman, who had previously been cheerful and energetic, now appeared more withdrawn but most surprising was that her stage performance wasn't affected at all, despite this situation. At the end of March, the orchestra was to perform at Chicago's Savoy Ballroom. This concert was the biggest test of the sabotage plan, because the orchestra members planned to make Billie Holiday look ridiculous on stage. The plan was this. When Billie sang her favorite song "Summertime," the orchestra would deliberately play in different tempo. Piano would play in one tempo, drums in another tempo, and saxophones in a completely different rhythm. This would leave Billie alone on stage and put her in an embarrassing situation. When concert night came, the plan was implemented. When "Summertime" began, the orchestra members acted as agreed. Lester Young played his saxophone in a different tempo, Joe Jones hit the drums in another rhythm, and Harry Edison played his trumpet in a completely incompatible way. Billie Holiday couldn't understand what was happening at first. She stood at the microphone listening to the orchestra, then tried to sing, but the sound had become cacophonous. The audience became restless and began booing. This situation went on for minutes. But what Billie Holiday did at that moment surprised everyone. Signaling for the orchestra to stop, she moved to the front of the stage and began singing "Summertime" a cappella. Only her voice and the silence of the room existed. This spontaneous move was so moving that the room was enchanted. Billie's voice reached all the audience members without any instrumental accompaniment. Each word came out with perfect pronunciation. Each note found its place. When the song ended, the applause that erupted lasted for minutes. The audience stood applauding her, shouting bravo. The orchestra members backstage were in shock. The plan had completely backfired. Billie Holiday had emerged even stronger. The expression on Lester Young's face clearly showed his disappointment. Joe Jones held his drumsticks, not knowing what to do. Harry Edison had put his trumpet aside and was shaking his head. The morning after the Chicago concert, Billie Holiday fully understood the situation. The sabotage wasn't coincidental, it was intentional. She went to the table where the orchestra members were gathered in the hotel restaurant and confronted them. "Gentlemen," she said in a calm but determined voice, "we need to talk." The table immediately fell silent. Lester Young squirmed uncomfortably in his seat. Harry Edison averted his eyes. Joe Jones scowled. "What happened on stage last night is unacceptable." Billie continued, "If you don't want to work with me, say so openly. Stop these childish games." Her tone was calm but determined. There was no anger in her eyes, only disappointment. At that moment, Lester Young decided to drop his mask. Standing up and looking at Billie, he said, "Lady Day," but all friendliness had vanished from his voice. "You're very talented. Nobody denies that. But this orchestra isn't your show. We were successful without you, and will be successful without you again." Harry Edison joined him. "You came here and changed everything. Nobody listens to us anymore. The audience only cares about you." Joe Jones added, "This was our orchestra. We've been working together for 10 years. You're a guest here." These words were like knives piercing Billie Holiday's heart. Especially Lester Young's attitude deeply hurt her. The person she thought was her closest friend was openly rejecting her. "I understand," Billie said in a cold voice. "So the problem is me. I'm hurting your male egos." Then she added, "Let me tell you something. I came here just to make music, but I see there's more politics here than music." That afternoon, Count Basie wanted to see Billie privately. This meeting would determine her fate in the orchestra. The young woman expected Basie to defend her, to stand up to the male egos, but the answer she received caused great disappointment. "Billie, you're a very talented artist," Basie said, "but problems have arisen in the orchestra. My musicians are uncomfortable. The chemistry has been off since you arrived." Billie was surprised. "I'm not causing problems, Mr. Basie. I'm just trying to do my job," Basie continued. "Maybe you should take a break for a while. This could be temporary. We can talk again in a few months." In this conversation, Billie Holiday realized that Count Basie was actually on the side of his orchestra members. Despite being in a leadership position, he was bowing to the pressure of male egos in his own orchestra. Basie had proven weak in protecting Billie, choosing the easy way out. "I understand, Mr. Basie," Billie said in a cold voice. "I just wanted to make music, but I see there are ego wars here, more than music." She stood up and added, "I'm resigning. But know this is your loss, not mine." Basie couldn't respond to these words. Deep down, he knew Billie was right, but he chose to bow to the male pressure in his orchestra. That evening, Billie Holiday packed her things and left the hotel. Her 3-month adventure with the Count Basie Orchestra had ended, but this ending would also be a new beginning. The orchestra members gathered in the dressing room and began celebrating Billie's departure. Lester Young opened a champagne bottle. "The orchestra is ours again," he said with a smile. Harry Edison looked relieved. "No one will overshadow us anymore." Joe Jones also joined the celebration. "The spotlight will return to us." But they didn't know that this celebration was premature. Because Billie Holiday's story wasn't ending here, on the contrary, it was just beginning. 3 months after leaving Count Basie, Billie Holiday received an unexpected offer. White orchestra leader Artie Shaw was inviting her to join his orchestra. This offer was revolutionary for that time. A black vocalist would work with a white orchestra, Accepting Shaw's offer was both a risk and a great opportunity for Billie. But the young woman had only one thing on her mind: making Count Basie and the orchestra members who betrayed her pay for their mistake. Artie Shaw's offer wasn't just professional, it was also personal. Shaw had become fascinated with Billie's talents and wanted to support her. "Billie," he had told her, "you're not just a vocalist, you're a complete artist. In my orchestra, your talent will be fully appreciated." These words were inspiring for Billie. The first rehearsal day with the Artie Shaw Orchestra was one of the turning points in Billie's life. Shaw's musicians approached Billie with respect, trying to support her. No one was trying to sabotage her. On the contrary, they were helping her give her best performance. "This is making music," Billie had said to herself, "not the war of male ego." Her first concert with the Artie Shaw Orchestra took place, surprisingly, in the same New York hall where Count Basie was to perform just a week later. This wasn't a coincidence. Billie Holiday had deliberately chosen this day. When she took the stage that night, most of the Count Basie Orchestra members were also in the audience. They had come to see how Billie would fail, but what they saw was the complete opposite of their expectation. That night, Billie Holiday delivered one of the most magnificent performances of her career. Her voice was stronger, fuller, and more affecting. She was in perfect harmony with Artie Shaw's orchestra. When she sang "I Can't Get Started," the room forgot to breathe. Each word hit its target like an arrow. The applause was like an endless storm. When the concert ended, audiences stood and applauded for minutes. That night, the Count Basie members waiting in the wings understood the magnitude of their mistake. By losing Billie Holiday, they hadn't just lost a vocalist, they had lost their future. The Count Basie Orchestra's concert in the same hall was a complete fiasco. Compared to Billie Holiday's concert a week earlier, the difference was stark. First, the hall was half empty. While Billie's concert took place in a completely packed hall, far fewer audience members came to Basie's concert. Even worse, the audience that did come kept shouting, "Where's Lady Day?" The songs the orchestra played were technically perfect, but there was no even Lester Young's saxophone solos couldn't create their former effect. Harry Edison's trumpet performance didn't get applause. Joe Jones's drum rhythm couldn't excite the audience. The most painful moment was when they started playing "Summertime." This was one of Billie Holiday's favorite songs and had become famous through her interpretation. When the orchestra started playing the song, the hall immediately fell silent. Everyone was waiting for Billie's voice, but only the instrumental version was played. When the song ended, there was a murmur of disappointment instead of applause. That night, the orchestra members understood this. Without Billie Holiday's voice, they were just an ordinary collection of musicians. The next day, newspapers compared the two concerts. The New York Times, "Last week's concert by Lady Day and Artie Shaw was musical perfection. This week's Count Basie concert was like listening to an orchestra with its soul removed." Downbeat magazine was even harsher. The Count Basie Orchestra lost its musical identity by losing Billie Holiday. "Now we're listening to an orchestra with only technical skill but no heart." By 1940, Billie Holiday had already gained worldwide fame with Artie Shaw. Strange Fruit was playing on radio stations, and record sales were breaking records. This success made the Count Basie Orchestra members restless, especially Lester Young. Prez felt increasingly regretful about his betrayal of Billie. One night in December, Lester Young couldn't stand it anymore and called Billie Holiday. He was crying on the phone. "Lady Day," he said, "forgive me for what I did to you. I was confused back then. I was jealous of you." Billie listened silently. Young continued, "After you left, the orchestra became like a dead body. We have sound but no soul. Will you come back?" Billie remained silent for a long time. Then she replied in a cold voice, "Prez, some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. You were my closest friend, but you betrayed me. Artie Shaw taught me not just to be a musical partner, but to be a friend. I'll never come back." In the summer of 1941, Count Basie had also put his pride aside and was ready to do anything to bring Billie Holiday back. The orchestra's popularity was gradually declining. Basie met with Billie's manager. "Tell Billie I need her. I'll give her whatever she wants," he said desperately. But Billie's answer was clear. "Tell Mr. Basie it's too late. When he fired me, he actually did me the biggest favor, because now I'm not in anyone's shadow." By the 1950s, the careers of the orchestra members who had betrayed Billie Holiday began to collapse. Harry Edison had alcohol problems and could no longer play trumpet properly. Joe Jones had fallen into depression and stopped playing drums. Lester Young had become addicted to drugs. Count Basie was trying to stay afloat alone, but there was no trace of the orchestra's former glory. This collapse wasn't coincidental. The music world hadn't forgotten the betrayal of Billie Holiday. Record companies, club owners, and the media approached those orchestra members with distance. The stigma of being those who betrayed Lady Day had ended their career. When Billie Holiday died in 1959, Count Basie was at her funeral. He was crying. When Lester Young approached the coffin, he whispered, "Lady Day, forgive me. My betrayal of you was the biggest mistake of my life. The music world will never forget you, but it will never forgive us either." Young's words became one of the most painful confessions in music history. The Count Basie Orchestra's betrayal of Billie Holiday is considered one of music history's greatest mistakes. Because this event wasn't just the firing of an artist, it's the clearest example of how ego and jealousy can destroy art. Had Lady Day stayed with the orchestra, it could have created jazz history's golden age. But the betrayal created by male egos and competitive feelings ended this unique collaboration forever. Billie Holiday's experience with the Count Basie Orchestra taught the music world important lessons. Real talent isn't fired, it just shines on different platforms. There should be cooperation among artists, not competition. And most importantly, losing great artists destroys not just the immediate loss, but all future potential. When we listen to Billie Holiday today, we hear not just music, but struggle. The young woman fired from the Count Basie Orchestra became a worldwide legend. Those who betrayed her are only remembered in history as those who betrayed Lady Day. This story is the tale of music history's greatest betrayal, but also proof that true talent cannot be stopped by any obstacle. As Billie Holiday said, "You can't destroy me, because I am music, and music is immortal." The Count Basie Orchestra learned this truth too late, but in music history, Lady Day's voice will live forever.